Thank you so much, Danielle. So, spiritual ecology. So, it's an interesting topic on spiritual ecology, because I'm going to tell you that what I'm not going to talk about today is the external world, about the people that believe in fossil fuel versus the people that believe in renewable. I've been a chemical engineer my entire life, and last Sunday my wife says I make my way in the fossil fuel industry. However, I do want you guys to know that my current project is a 100% renewable project. I'm turning soybean oil into diesel fuel, 100% renewable. And so for those of you that like the environment, I can testify legislation works, because when legislation is on board, our clients follow it. And I'm proud of the hundreds of tons of pollutants I've saved from the air and the water in my career. So once the legislation is in hand, it's my job as an engineer to follow that legislation. So when I think of spiritual ecology, and thank you, Reverend Nicole, for the wonderful introduction for it today, I think spiritual ecology is that part of us inside that bubbles up, that ties us, our feeling nature, into the earth itself. And so for me, I do that at night on the ocean. When I can go on the ocean in a bright moonlit night, feel the salt air, hear the waves coming in. Actually, I almost feel, if I sit close enough to the shore, if I'm careful not to get washed away, I can feel the vibration of the waves coming in. And I can feel like I'm attached to all that. So that's what spiritual ecology is. And I'm going to talk about several different people who hinted to us that there's some natural laws that can help us in this existence. But before I go into those definitions, let me define what I think I teach here. And a perfect example of it is my Power of Now class. And we're in basic principles. We're into what is the concept, what is the nature of God? And it's good, empowering, everything like that. What is the nature of humanity? It's good, it's empowering, it's blissful, it's helping each other. And then we get to this middle thing on how does our world come into existence? And that's our creative process. And so we teach here that there's a creative process, much like a fertile soil. And we listen to the ancient Hindu words where consciousness is the ground of all being. So everything that's caused by consciousness or thought. And this creative soil just turns that seed into what that seed is meant to be. Now I can drop a poison seed in it will grow poison. I can drop a weed in it will grow weed. I can drop something that will cure cancer in it and it will grow a plant that will cure cancer. So this great creative medium doesn't judge me for what I do. It doesn't say, Reverend Michael, are you sure you want to raise poison? No. It's not judgmental. But that's the law. The law just supports bringing the consciousness into evolution. And we're reading from this book this month, Spiritual Ecology. Chapter 1, there's a Native American expression of this law of nature, of this natural law. And it starts with a saying, it goes like this: Neawinha skano, which means thank you for being well. I translate it for thank you for having a healthy consciousness. It's all about taking care of the planet, honoring Mother Earth, taking care of it, and acting as if you're part of the earth. It goes on and says, all comes down to the will. What is in your heart? Is it in your heart to take care of the earth or not to take care of the earth? My message to you today is where the change is going to come, the most powerful thing we can do, we can change our consciousness and go do that work of consciousness in the world. And then it goes on to say something that I might say if I was teaching a class. It says, the spiritual side of the natural world is absolute. The laws are absolute. Our instructions are to get along and support these natural laws. If you do that, life is endless. And that's the same thing that we believe. If you get along and follow these laws, life is endless. And if you push against these laws, life becomes more difficult. And the way to know the difference is to listen to what's inside you. They also believe in the power of prayer. They typically have their prayers and their traditions around two things. And in this book, we've talked about one is to be thankful. That's one of our 5 steps of prayer we do. And the other is to enjoy life. And those of us who are interested in the concept of world peace, myself included, it says to have world peace, we need to listen to natural law and get along with Mother Earth. And so what they're saying to us, and what everyone I'm going to tell you about today is saying to us, this natural law understanding is inherent in us. It's a divine birthright in us. But it wasn't just the Native Americans. Remember we talked about the great Stoic philosophers last month? They went from 300 before the Common Era to maybe 200 after the Common Era started. And they believed in the same thing. So they put together, there was 4 elements, or moving forces that they called them in the world. There was air, and there was fire, and there was water, and there was earth. The air and the fire were the active ones. The water and the earth were the passive ones. And they believed that the air and the fire came together and created breath, which they called pneuma. And that's what created the life experience. And they also believed that there was some organizing principle. This organizing principle they called the logos. This organizing principle is starting to look a lot like what I just talked about, that creative medium. That which can take thought and consciousness and organize it and create the world around us. So the Stoics believed there was a natural law that not only did your bidding, but was there for you to think about. That's where their ethics came from. That's where their value system came from. So we're getting the same thing from the Native American and from the Stoics. And flash forward 1,000 years, we get the same thing from the mainstream Christianity. Aquinas, I always have trouble with that name, I don't know why. He was a 13th century monk and theologian. And he came up with this thing called natural law theory. And it was a bit more social-based. It's about life and upbringing your kids and educating your kids and loving your God and taking care of others' compassion. But he said the same thing. He said, if we didn't have the book, it would be our nature, our rational nature, to do these things. So the same thing, this natural law, which I think is going to take us from where we are now to where we need to go. I know that. Because it's our sandbox to play with. Because what the natural law does for us, it allows us to experiment. Because what's the natural law? There's something called the law of cause and effect. So if you want to see how your life is going, look around you. Because as we use this law, we put our thought in as a cause. The law creates the effect, and that's the world that we live in. And Ernest Holmes was the best, in my mind, at putting all these different thoughts and traditions together. And I'm going to quote a lot more than you've ever heard me quote from Ernest Holmes, because he got this very, very good. He really nailed this. And what I'm quoting from is this big tome of a book. Anyone seen this? And what do we call it when we're in classes? We call it the textbook, right? It's pretty heavy, but look in, and this is all from the second or third chapter called The Thing Itself. And he starts off telling us what the divine plan is. That's probably a good thing for us to know. The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Thank goodness, that's worth a prayer itself, right? How many people have told me, the reason I came here, I don't know where this image came from, but it's the same image. There was some old patriarchal figure with a flowing white beard sitting on a white cloud. And so, thank goodness that we aren't destined to live a life of misery until we do something and some far-off entity tells us, oh, we'll give you providence, or we'll give you salvation, or we won't. The life of grace has been ours all along. And the reason we aren't living the life of grace is just we forgot who we are. He goes on about freedom and then introduces the law. He says, freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. This is the inherent nature of humanity, ever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. But the love of the universe must be one with the law of its own being. We approach love through law. This is our true teaching. As the love of God is perfect, so the law of God is also perfect. We must understand both. So we have this sandbox, as I've said, and we can experiment with this. And the law has this interesting part about it. Thomas Troward, who was one of Ernest Holmes' primary teachers, not that they ever met, but Dr. Holmes read Troward's books and said 25% of what we get in the Science of Mind philosophy came from Thomas Troward. And if you read the Science of Mind books, all the students will say, that's exactly what Troward said. He didn't change a word, and it's certainly in that big book. But the concept is with this law, because remember, it's all part of God. This law has this softer, loving accent to it. Thomas Troward tells us if we understand, the more we understand the law, the better we can make use of it. And I didn't understand that for a long time, because if the law is mechanical, why do we even need to understand it? But he goes on to talk to us about intuition. And intuition, in my rephrasing of what I think Thomas Troward was telling us, intuition is the divine mother whispering to us, you know, you might want to consider doing this and doing that. Just very slightly in a low voice. And if we're overly busy, we won't hear it. We've got other things to do. We've got other things that are occupying our time. But he goes on to talk about how we can use this law. He tells us experience has taught us that the subjective tendency of this intelligent law of creative force may consciously be directed and definitely used. This is the greatest discovery of all time. And he goes on to say it's nothing woo-woo or something that people have to go through a medium to understand. He says, there is no mystery here, but a profound fact and a demonstrable one. The road to freedom lies not through mystery and occult performances, but through intelligent use of nature's forces and laws. The law of mind is a natural law in the spiritual world. So the law of mind, or what I call universal law, a lot from up here, is just a natural law. It's not a metaphysical law that you have to have 4 degrees to access. It's something there. It works in the physical world, and it works in this world that we talk about, where we're taking spiritual stuff that doesn't have a physical reality and turning it into a reality through the use of this wonderful law. It's a beautiful thing to do, and it's a very empowering thing for us to do. And he goes on to talk about this evolution of consciousness. He says, through experience, humanity learns what is really good and satisfying and what is true and worthwhile. As humankind intelligence increases and our capacity to understand the subtle laws of nature grows, so will we gradually be set free. And as we learn the truth will automatically free us. And so he's telling us to use it as a sandbox. And he's telling us, guess what? We're evolving our consciousness. And we're using this law, this universal law, what the Stoics would say is this great organizing structure that's there for the universe. It's within you. It's within me. And that's what we need to listen to, not the pundits on each side. We need to go within and reaffirm that natural law that's working and functioning inside each of us every day. Because that's where the solutions are. The solutions aren't out in the shadows where people are arguing back and forth. The solutions are coming within from you and from me. Because as we think about things, we physically change the world. And the more of us that get really in touch with this internal law, this oneness, the more good we can do in the world. So it's a powerful thing to be. And it's come to us from a lot of different cultures, a lot of different faith traditions. And so my challenge to you is to go inside, find that touch to the natural law, and make use of it. And now I'd like to end in prayer. And let's just go within to that power, to that peace, to that place where we know we don't have to do anything to be divine. We know that our divinity was spirit ordained, was here with us from the very beginning. And we know we have this wonderful thing called the law, the natural law, that can help us on our journey of evolving our consciousness and setting us free. We can use this powerful law to go from a feeling of lack and turn it into abundance. We can use this natural law from going to what looks like bad or stressed relationships to loving and compassionate relationships. We can use this natural law from going from a state of not caring or ambivalence to a state of pure compassion for each and every person you meet. And I know that this community is blessed. The people that come here are empowered and on high. They know what prosperity is. They know what abundance is. They know what love and compassion is. And they not only know these things, but they act as if they know these things, and they demonstrate these things every day. And when we come together as this blessed spiritual community, we take our individual greatness and share it openly and honestly and create something even greater when we come together as this wonderful group. And for this life of spirit, I can just say thank you, thank you, thank you, that it is my life and each and every one of your lives right here and right now. So help me ground this by saying together, and so it is. Namaste.